Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Vicarage today. Great to see you, and thank you again, as always, for joining our Bible talk this morning. We are in the 14th chapter of Mark. We are getting to the sharp end now. Just to remind you of the all-important context, Jesus is in Jerusalem during the day, but he's kipping down a couple of miles away at Bethany every night. He's been in the temple. He's answered a lot of questions. He's asked some questions, and he's left the temple. And on his way home, he sat down back to Bethany. He sat down with the disciples, and they've looked over the Kidron Valley. They've seen that, and now he's gone back to Bethany, presumably for the evening. But Jesus may have gone home for the evening, but things don't stop. Must be a 24-hour city, because while he's been away, the plots against him by the religious leaders and so on start hotting up. So here we are, Mark's Gospel, chapter 14. I'm going to read you verses 1 to 11. Here goes. It was 2 days before the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. And the chief priests and the scribes were looking for a way to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. For they said, not during the festival, or there may be a riot among the people. While he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard. And she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. And some were there who said to one another in anger, why was this ointment wasted in this way? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and the money given to the poor. And they scolded her. But Jesus said, let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She's performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish, but you will not always have me. She's done what she could. She's anointed my body beforehand for its burial. Truly I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her. Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. When they heard it, they were greatly pleased and promised to give him some money. So he began to look for an opportunity to betray Jesus. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Right, what you have here is a classic Mark sandwich. Let me tell you what I mean. You've got one unit, it's all supposed to be seen as one unit, this section is. You've got stories of plotting against Jesus in Jerusalem. You've got the story of what happened to Simon the leper's house. And you've got more plotting against Jesus in Jerusalem there. So you've got plotting, Simon the leper's house, plotting again. So it's a classic Mark sandwich. You're supposed to see the whole thing as one unit. And I think what Mark wants us to see here, really, is the contrast between what happens with the plotting and what happens at Simon the leper's house. Let me tell you what I mean. Firstly, there's very much an out and in thing going on here. Where does the plotting happen? The plotting happens in Jerusalem. You know, it's the chief priests, it's the in crowd, and it happens at the holiest time of year, getting ready for the great feast. So it's in the holy city. It's the holy people at the holy time. That's when this plotting takes place. On the other hand, where does the incident at Simon's house happens? It happens outside the city. It happens at the house of Simon the leper, who must have been presumably healed of leprosy. So what I think Mark wants us to see is the contrast between the in crowd where the plotting is and the out crowd where this wonderful thing, act of devotion, happens. But not only that, I think it brings into stark choice really here the contrast between the plotting and what happens at Simon's house. I mean, the plotting is just vile, isn't it? These people, they're chief priests, but they hate Jesus. And they do anything to try and kill him. And they're frustrated because they want to get him, but they can't, because if they go searching for him, they're worried there might be a riot. And then, of course, at the end, Judas Iscariot comes and gives them the opportunity they were looking for. And why does Judas betray Jesus? I mean, as you can imagine, many speculations, many PhDs have been written about that over the years. Did he do it for the money? Did he do it because 30 pieces of silver? Did he do it because he wasn't happy that Jesus is doing it the way, Messiahship wasn't the idea he had in mind? Could he have been trying to accelerate the process? I don't know what happens. Or could it have been, as John's Gospel said, that the devil entered into him to make him do it? We do not know what he did. We don't know why he did it. We know what he did. Basically, he gave Jesus his position away. I think it's a bit ironic because I'm sure that Jesus didn't exactly keep a low profile, and I believe the chief priests would have found him pretty soon anyway. But I think the important thing you have to remember here about the betrayal of Jesus, a betrayal that Judas did of Jesus, I think the thing to remember most here is that it was a betrayal. That amongst all the other pains that Jesus went through, that he was betrayed by one of his friends. And I think, along with all the shame he later endured, the pain and everything else, and separation from God, here we have the fact that he was betrayed by one of his closest friends. So you've got the contrast here between the plotting, the vile plotting in the holy city. But here we have in Bethany, we have this wonderful act of devotion. This woman that comes in and anoints Jesus with this ointment. By the way, I've got some. This is spikenard. My dear mum bought it for me a few years ago. It smells very nice, actually. It's a lovely, expensive ointment. So we've got the contrast here between the out of the camp in Bethany, where Jesus is, and the in the camp, where there's plotting is going on. And in the camp, you've got the vile plotting, the gathering together of these people against Jesus, the kind of nastiness of that, combined with this wonderful act of love by this woman. So you're supposed to see the contrast between the in and the out, the hatred and the love. Just try and get hold of that if you can. But I think there's even more to this, because actually the drama of what's going on at Bethany is quite breathtaking too. Because what does this woman do? And interesting enough, we're not given her name, which I think it almost makes it more... So we don't actually know who she is. Mark doesn't actually specify it for us. But what does it tell us about what she does? She comes in and she has this expensive ointment. No, I'm sure this wasn't. But it says 300 denarii, which about that is a gather, is about a year's wages. So she gets this year's wage, this ointment, which is so expensive, it's like a year's pay. Imagine this was worth, I don't know, £30,000 or something. It's that kind of level of magnitude. She gets this incredibly expensive ointment. And she doesn't just pour it on so she can put the lid back on. It actually says she smashed the jar. So she gives the whole lot. She can't just keep some more for a rainy day or keep some for a mum next Christmas or something. She smashes the whole lot. And what's more, this is an incredible act of sort of somewhat, really weepy, emotional. This is almost quite embarrassing what's going on here as well. It's what I'm trying to get you to see is this is a massive act of devotion. As I say, she puts the whole lot on of this extremely expensive stuff, and it's all done very emotionally. And you can imagine the people was going, and they all find it all terribly, terribly embarrassing. And it's an interesting reflection for us, isn't it? Because we kind of like religion, which is measured, don't we? We like things to be ordered and careful. And actually, I think we often find, don't we, that when people have an emotional reaction to Jesus, we find it all a bit embarrassing, don't we? That here we have this woman in the story showing us the right way. That she loved Jesus so much, that she loved him so much that she smashed the ointment on him, that she threw herself and she wiped it with her hair and so on. And this ointment wasn't just the cheap stuff you can get down the shop. This was mega expensive stuff. So I want you to see the major act of devotion here. But ask us, how would we have felt if we'd been in the room at the time? Would we have been rejoicing with her? Or would we have been a bit embarrassing? Because I tend to kind of think that we prefer things to be measured, don't we? But actually, I think this woman shows us a better way. But I think there's one more thing, which I think is remarkable about what she does here. In Jesus talks about, because they try and scold her, and Jesus says, she's anointed me for my burial. I guess what he's saying here is that maybe she'd spotted something that they hadn't spotted, that Jesus was about to die, that she recognized that he was about to die for us. His grand plan was not to win over, kick out the Romans militarily. His grand plan was to die so that we can have life, to give his life so that we can have life. To lay down his life for his friends, to die for the sins of humanity so that we can have forgiveness and so on. And by anointing Jesus' feet with oil and so on, before it happened, she was pointing to this, that she knew, maybe she didn't know, maybe she just somehow was, but whatever reason, she anoints him for his burial. In a sense, she could maybe see something that they couldn't see, that he was about to do. So, 3 things from this morning's reading, and I think there's so much to say. I think firstly, I want you to see the contrast. See the contrast between the hatred in Jerusalem, the plotters, and the love of this woman in Bethany. See also the fact that one is inside the camp is where the plotting's going, whereas what Jesus does, Jesus happens outside the camp. Recognize also that this woman, when she did this act to Jesus, it wasn't a measured act of careful. It was actually a massive, a wonderful act of devotion. It was emotional, it was expensive, it was irreversible. And let's try and respond like her and have a similar response to Jesus ourselves today. But let's also honour this woman and what she did. And she could see what they perhaps couldn't see, that Jesus was about to lay down his life for us.